So a blunt first question to start off with. Who are you and what do you do?
So my name is Harry Beard. I'm 23 from Bedford, and I'm the co-founder of an organisation called Prospect 100, and
Yep.
we run online competitions for young designers. And we're really trying to be the TED of competitions.
Okay, so talking of TED, you've given me a nice little segue. I
Okay.
watched your TED talk
Okay.
that you did on Gen Z, the modern age. So it's the people that are born between 1995 and 2012?
2010.
2010.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's me and you as well.
Yeah, exactly.
There
99.
we go. So first-hand experience, and particularly on the opportunities we have.
Yeah.
And potentially waste as well. So it's been cool. I googled it just to look it up and look about some facts. This is the digital age.
Yeah.
So particularly with technology and social media and all of that sort of stuff, just straight into it. The mental health effects. So sort of going into the negativity. What do you think the mental health effects of social media and everything around it are?
I think there's so many different ways to look at that question because I'll give it from a very personal answer. I joined Facebook when I was 7 years old.
Yeah.
And so just because I wanted to play Farmville, right? And I think that's probably a similar reason why many early adopters joined Facebook. And so one of the things that really keeps me up at night, let's say, is the fact that I have no idea what I was saying on the internet at the age of 7 or 8 or 9. And we see so many examples of people having their careers completely destroyed. Exactly. By stuff they were saying when they were 30 or stuff they were saying when they were fully grown, mature adults. And also sometimes time could be, some of these tweets that are coming out about people from sort of 2013. So they were already famous, already in the public eye, but times and perceptions have changed. And now, that message they put in 2013 is definitely...
It meant nothing at the time, and now it means...
the point is when they put it out, no one commented, but it's come back to haunt them.
Oh, right, yeah. Okay,
and
exactly,
so I am always really paranoid about, what on earth was 7-year-old Harry saying to his mates by chat? It's crazy. And so I think we can go down a whole rabbit hole, but I think one of the things that, just from a personal perspective, because I've never personally suffered from mental health issues, so I don't want to talk too much on that just because I've never had personal experience, I guess. But from a real personal experience for me, I am always really paranoid about the fact that my life could come to an end based on a message I sent when I was 8 because I wanted to play Farmville. And that really worries me. I think platforms like Snapchat, whilst the ghost messaging feature was probably almost like a joke to begin with. I think the whole thing to begin with was like risky messages that you wanted to send. Whereas now I actually look at that and go, wow, that's a platform for a generation because, it really is, I guess, sort of quite protective in some respects. So I think Snapchat, that feature has been really strong. But yeah, I definitely think social media clearly has a lot of problems. But as you mentioned within my talk, I really tried to focus on the benefits. Because I think the internet is always filled with loads of negatives. So I was trying to be really positive in my outlook, which was the guys I started Prospect 100 with, I never would have met without social media. And there are plenty of examples of, so we worked on a brand partnership with Swatch at the end of last year. That wouldn't have been possible without social media. I started Prospect 100 with my two founders I met on social media, using just social media to launch the business with no real upfront capital. And so when I was presenting the talk, I did overlook slightly, and again, I was young, I guess, when giving the talk, and maybe not the most informed even to this day, but still, my talk was really focused on there are lots of negatives, and we can spend hours upon hours talking about them. But actually, one thing I want to say is there are plenty of opportunities that are available to us, a generation now, that weren't available to my grandparents, and I bet they would love to have had those opportunities. Exactly, and I really wanted to create this message, which was, okay, for better or worse, there are great opportunities that can come from social media. And I think more of us can be trying to maximize those opportunities. So, for example, this podcast, if we were to do something similar to this 10 years ago,
it'd be very different.
Yeah, we'd be sat in front of a live audience of 100 people or whatever the number would turn up. Whereas now you can put this out there on the internet and let's see how many views it gets. Who knows?
Exactly. Yeah. So do you think it's sort of as a society, in the media and press, we only sort of report the negative things that happen, or the negative tweets that someone's tweeted or something like that?
Well, I mean, sensationalism, right? So anything that's going to get clicks, and that's usually
The
a
negative
really
stuff.
great or a really low.
Yeah.
Probably more often lows because it sparks debate, right? So there was something quite interesting recently when Elon Musk went to buy Twitter, and a load of the devs at Twitter were coming out saying that they were told at Twitter to make the algorithm as such that it would promote conversation sparking topics, and often those are probably more negative than positive, let's say.
That's probably true, yeah. So just keeping on the Gen Z sort of topic, another thing it said on Google is about reduced attention span, confidence and vocabulary. It used like these 3 words throughout, particularly with social media as well, and like talking. Everyone's talking online now. You don't need to meet up with someone to have a conversation with them. So do you think that's true? And do you think it is a problem that's going to potentially affect us as a generation in the future?
Yeah, I think there's definitely going to be lots of problems and long-term effects, most of which we probably aren't fully aware of today. One which is quite interesting, I was talking with someone about recently, was particularly to do with working from home. So this idea that Generation Z are kind of the first working from home generation, and whilst that sounds great because you can now not commute and you save that kind of 30-minute buffer for commute every day that I used to have, I guess, going into central Bedford. One thing that is being really missed out on is all of the stuff you learn by osmosis almost. So just by sitting in an office or sitting in a classroom, you're going to pick up things or have conversations or overhear someone speaking, which is actually helping your development, which our generation is really going to miss out on potentially if we're working from home. And the person I was speaking about this with made a prediction that the generation after us would leapfrog our generation because of that aspect, that they're getting all of those extra, I guess, in-person minutes.
So it's something we sort of look over. I feel like it's something you don't notice is happening, but it is key to your development as a person.
Yeah, for sure. I never thought about that before.
Yeah, exactly.
And again, because we've never been in an office, I guess we were never going to think about
That's
that,
true,
right?
Yeah.
So
from people that do know, it's obviously something they can see that's happening.
Yeah, it was a comment which, when it was made to me, I was like, oh, yeah, that's probably pretty true, but it would be impossible for me to notice. But I'm interested to know, what do you think to that as a...
I do feel like it's sort of the same. Obviously, I haven't had the time as like going out and having all these conversations with people and watching like people around me develop, if you know what I mean, to see how they become who they are based on interactions with other people. But I do feel sort of the same way as you, to be honest, that we are going to grow up differently, but then it's also going to be a different society that's had to adapt because of these missed out social interactions and everything becoming more based on social media.
What do you think to the idea about the attention span, though, particularly?
I think it's true. I think I'm probably a victim to it as well. Definitely.
I think it's really interesting. I think, and in the talk you mentioned, the phrase I reused was like a BS filter. So I feel like the attention span, but I don't know about you, I'm quite good at watching a sort of 40-minute Sidemen YouTube video or something. So I feel like once my attention's been grabbed, I'm pretty all in.
But the time, like, for the attention to be grabbed is very, very, very short.
6 seconds or something, they say, right? And that's probably
or
quite
you just
long.
click off and you're straight on something else as well.
For sure. So it's all about that idea of an initial hook. But I think once someone's attention's hooked,
as long as they keep it going.
Yeah, Sidemen have proven, though, that kids our age are pretty willing to sit there for a while.
It is true. But then I feel some of the older stuff, like, this is just me, it's probably not other people as well, but like nature documentaries or just generally TV programs, I can't like sit down and just watch. I just lose interest from it, which sounds very broad, just saying like all TV programs.
No, it's true.
It's true.
Yeah, I mean, YouTube's kind of, I guess, become king for that. You know,
it has, yeah.
David Dobrik with the 4-minute long videos. Mr. Beast is super quick with everything. So definitely the attention span is shortened, but I'm quite interested by this idea that our generation has no attention span, and it's like, if it's not 10 seconds, then get rid of it. And Quibi was that whole video platform that took that mantra where they tried to create vertical content that was only 10 minutes or under. And, you know, I was quite fascinated by the fact that actually I think a lot of the best YouTube content I watch is probably 14 or 15 minutes long minimum, because I feel like a 6-minute video is not long enough to really get anything interesting. But definitely I'm not sat there watching for 2 hours. Like, we were just talking about the Elvis movie, like 3 hours is pretty long.
Yeah, exactly. So it's definitely grabbing the audience attention straight away is like key to like media nowadays, I feel like.
for sure. And I think TikTok's really, I guess, emphasized that more than anything.
I feel that's true, because if you get bored of something straight, you can just get it and it's gone. There's something else new straight away.
Yeah, exactly.
And everything has to be short. So it's basically their business model, to be honest.
Yeah, I think TikTok's super fascinating. I'm really intrigued by their ability to just make kids famous. The algorithm's so strong. Instagram never had that mantra of how do we make everyone famous, and I guess that's what TikTok's massive strength is, because it really incentivizes you to keep posting and post as much as possible, no matter how long or I guess the content is. It's just constant barrage of posting, and I think TikTok's done a few things really well, like as we mentioned, the short form content, but the algorithm's been really strong.
So with the thing you just mentioned of like anyone or kids particularly becoming famous, what do you think the best way to like make noise on these social media platforms is, and to become famous? Obviously it depends on the platform, but as a general rule.
I mean, I don't know, because I've never done it myself. I can definitely tell you what we at Prospect 100 done to build a name for ourselves, and we really focused on I guess 3 key things. One was sharing. So there's this idea called K factor. It's like quite a technical term, and it's how can you get as many people as possible to share what you're doing. So for us, our competitions when we first started were really designed to get as many people to share them as possible. Which is why we were able to get like quite a few impressions on everything for not any budget, I suppose. The second thing was for us celebrity endorsement. I think we were really fortunate with the pandemic, because there were a lot of people at home who were, not able to, I guess, continue with daily life. So we were able to attract the attention of people we probably wouldn't have done normally. And I think what's interesting is, and I tested it a bit with TikTok. I posted just like a normal video, and then another video, which again was pretty mundane, but there was a celebrity's face in it. And the celebrity face video got 10,000 views. And the random TikTok got like 100. And definitely I think we as people are drawn to celebrities. It's quite an obvious one, but I find that it changes perception so easy. We could have just been an Instagram account making random competitions, but the fact that there was someone vaguely credible in some way associating themselves to it, it made what we were doing more interesting and more shareable. And so I definitely think if you can ever attach yourselves to a credible figure or a credible institution, that's really powerful. And the third thing for us was, again, I guess it's that credibility, but really press is pretty strong. Like I think I definitely overlooked the power of press, and now press comes in so many different forms, particularly with TikTok. There are publications that are just on TikTok, and they're not really on anything else. And for us, that was a really strong way of getting, I guess, more people to see our name and to see what we were about, and to also help tell our story. So I don't know how an individual becomes famous, because I've never done it, but that's how we made our brand
so
slightly more well known.
So sorry, is there anything else?
No, sorry. Sorry.
So as sort of an individual or a company, do you feel like it's very much trying to work out what the algorithm is and then playing your cards right into it?
I think we definitely have tried to do sort of tricks like that, I guess, which were suggested to us by people. I don't know if it's so much. I definitely think you want to make an element of science in there, but for us, we really focused on building a brand. Like, what's the story? Who are we? What are we about? And that story is not just verbal, or that brand is not just a verbal brand; it's a visual brand as well. So, how do we tell those stories, etc.? So, for us, we've really focused on brand. But again, it's hard for me to tell about an individual, because I've never grown a huge TikTok account where I've done something. So, it's hard for me. But I definitely think what we've done is really look at inspirational figures for us. And I think what's great with the internet is you can see everything. You see someone's oldest post from when they were first starting. If you're looking at businesses, you can look on Crunchbase and find old articles. And I really recommend using blueprints. Again, if we were starting a business in the 1950s, I'd have had to go and read up in encyclopedias or whatever it might be about other companies and try and meet with individuals. Whereas now, I can just go onto Crunchbase or find old articles or look at their first ever social media posts and really understand how they grew. And I definitely recommend, all of the information we want in the world is
at our fingertips.
It's pretty accessible, right? So I definitely recommend looking for blueprints where possible.
So you mentioned branding. Do you think branding is one of the most important parts of being successful when starting or like having a company?
Again, I'm going to caveat this with saying, like, I think there's probably lots of different things that are really important. There's not sort of a one size fits all.
Yeah.
I definitely feel for us, branding was really important.
Yeah.
Because that perception is kind of everything at the beginning. I felt, and I think the way you create a brand or the type of brand you create is really interesting. I think one of the things I would definitely say, and this is something which my co-founder Alex really told me about, and the more I look at blueprints, I find this to be true, is the idea of mastering kind of one thing. So what's the one thing you're known for? So in the case of like Prospect, we want to be known as the best competitions on the internet, right?
Yeah.
We want to run the best, and maybe even boiling it down slightly further to design competitions. And I always like to use the analogy of clothing brands here, because like if I was to say to you jeans, I'm not going to ask just in case you don't say it, but I would like to think Levi's would probably be one of the top 3 brands you'd say. Or if I said puffer jacket, you'd probably say the North Face.
Probably, yeah.
And I think what's really smart is that they own share of mind for like one very specific thing. And my belief is I would way rather be a brand that's known for one thing really, really well, because at least every time you think of that one thing, you're going to think of me, rather than being the 5th or 6th company you think of for a lot of different things.
You want to be the one thing.
That's my belief. Like, maybe I'm wrong, but that was really my belief. And it was something which Alex like really kind of introduced me to, I guess, a few years ago. And it was like, okay, so we want to be the number one for competitions in the same way TED is TED is a pop culture reference now. In the same way, the North Face is known for a puffer jacket. And so, I just find that branding, like obviously you've got a brand from your name and your logo and like your beliefs, blah, blah, blah. But I was really fascinated by this idea of branding on a perception of, when you think of my organization, what's the first 3 things that come to your mind?
Yeah. So and it's how people see you rather than.
Yeah.
They're like how they mentally see you almost rather than how they physically see you.
Exactly. So like obviously we want to be cool visually and have celebrities attached to our name so that we're a great entity. But I really want, if someone says, what's Prospect 100? You would, if you know nothing else, you would just turn around and go, oh, they run online design competitions. If that's all you knew about us, like that was the key message I really wanted to get across from the very beginning.
So moving into marketing, which is obviously an important part of literally all companies, one traditional way that I learned to market was to include a lot of comedy in your marketing, or jokes, or make it almost relatable to the people that are watching it. In the modern day of social media and a lot of people getting cancelled and things that would have been okay to say like 20 years ago or something, now becoming offensive to people. Do you feel like marketing with a comedy is a risky method?
I think some brands do it really, really well. I was at an agency recently called Wyden and Kennedy, and they are incredible at it. Like, they do the marketing for McDonald's, etc., and they're phenomenal. Like, they're so good when it comes to comedy. And Wendy's do a great job as well. Ryanair did an incredible job. I'm always a little bit scared of it. Like, even when we're doing captions on Instagram or something, I'm always a bit like, oh. Because I think what can be funny to someone
won't be funny to someone else.
Yeah, or it could just come across as like really unfunny. And I'm not too worried about, I know who I am as an individual. I'm probably not going to say anything that's crazy, like offensive or something. But I'm probably going to say something which I find hilarious and everyone else is like, what the heck was this guy on about? So, I think it's great for sure. Me as an individual, I don't think I'm funny enough to be going around writing loads of captions. So, but if I would love to find someone that's funny to be creating our Instagrams, because I definitely think some of our best performing posts on Instagram have had elements of humor, kind of piggybacking off memes or trends a bit. But comedy always does well for sure. But me as an individual, me as Harry, I'm always a little bit like, because I don't know about you, do you ever read like Instagram posts from, I always find culturally as well, what's a funny joke in the UK might not be
a funny joke somewhere else.
And that always scares me a bit. I don't know if you feel the same.
No, I do feel the same, and writing something that's going to be funny to like a wide like age bracket, a wide number of cultures, everything. That's going to be really difficult to do, I feel like. So if you can be successful with that, it's probably very profitable.
I think it's really good for brands that have like a very clear, like Lyrical Lemonade. I love their Instagram account, and I think their stuff's maybe not like hilarious, funny, but it's definitely sort of, if you were to look at it and you didn't know Lyrical Lemonade, it's almost their own language.
Yeah,
right?
It's almost, yeah.
And I find Lyrical Lemonade incredible in that respect, and their audience is brought into the Lyrical Lemonade language.
Yeah.
And I think any brand that has their own language, because then you can kind of create jokes which are not in the realm of the UK or the US, but they're in the realm of Lyrical Lemonade. And I find that works really well. And for sure, I know that a lot of the top brands are building similar ecosystems, but Lyrical Lemonade does an amazing job. Again, I'm really obsessed with blueprints, and Lyrical Lemonade for me is, they've done an incredible job.
So we can base it off Lyrical Lemonade. So Cole Bennett, the founder, owner, writer, he directs all the videos as well and everything, for anyone that doesn't know. He is obviously young. He's only like in his 20s. So do you feel like people to make these relatable, funny, like Instagram accounts or music videos nowadays, do you feel like they need to be part of the generation they're making them for to be on board with it?
I don't know. Like, I find Kevin Hart funny, and he's not my generation. So,
that's true.
And I think that's one of those kind of maybe that's kind of a rhetoric that's often used by marketers who are young, because it's like an easy selling point. So I'm sure I've probably used that line myself. But I think Virgil Abloh was the real voice of a generation, or Kanye West probably resonates with, and again, I'm really targeting that Lyrical Lemonade audience. But like Cole Bennett speaks to that audience as well as Virgil or Kanye does, but they're not the same age. So I don't know. I really think age can almost be a mindset sometimes. And I actually find that some of the traits that are really commonly attributed to young people in this day and age are actually probably more prevalent in older generations than in our generation sometimes, because obviously the narrative around our generation is being written by that generation quite often. So I don't think you have to be young for sure. I definitely think like clearly it's more relatable. Like
you understand it more if you're part of it. Almost. Yeah,
Cole Bennett's super cool because he is a kid from Chicago, and you're like, wow, this 23-year-old, or I think he's 23, is doing all of this, and that is what makes. So I definitely think it makes the story more compelling for sure. I don't think you have to be though. But again, like, what do you think?
I feel like you do. Well, I don't see any reason why someone, say older, couldn't be part of and understand like all the trends with our generation, everything like that. And I also feel like, as much as it's sort of overlooked, there is a lot to do with the talent behind it as well. He's clearly, although he's this relatable young person, he's clearly like very talented, and he's got all of these ideas for high production music videos all the time, and he's keep coming out with new original ones. So I feel like it is a lot to do with the talent, and it is a lot to do with that understanding who your audience is. Like, he clearly knows exactly what his audience want and what the artist audience want. But then I also do feel like you need to just be part of who you're selling to, who you're selling a product to, and understand what they want as well.
Yeah, and I think, his collab with Minions really showed how good he was at making a generation move. Yeah. All those kids rocking up to cinemas wearing suits.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's a tricky one. I think we can all find like nuanced answers where it's like, oh, well, Virgil spoke to a generation better than anyone, and he wasn't in it, and but Cole Bennett does, and he was. So I think we'll find arguments either way. I think I would just say, like, if you yourself are starting and that's really, I guess, the narrative, which I think is quite nice to push. Yeah, obviously, just being within your culture, no matter what that is, find your subculture that you want to dominate and immerse yourself in that subculture. In the same way, Cole Bennett, his sole focus at the beginning. And this goes back to actually the idea of like owning one thing. Like, we know him for music videos. Yeah. Like, there aren't that many people around in the world that we know just for music videos. Yeah. I guess Coody now because of Genius. Yeah. And I forgot the guy's name. The guy that Kanye made Jesus Walks with instead of Coody.
Is it Steve Cannon?
Nah, I can't remember. But we know Cole Bennett for that one thing.
The one thing, yeah.
And he's now been able to branch out because of that. But he only did Chicago-based artists to begin with. Yeah. So it was like he really knew that culture. Like, he knew exactly like who were the hottest rappers in Chicago. he obviously did super lo-fi content or like low production quality to begin with. And he knew that audience better than anyone. And that doesn't mean you have to be a certain age or anything. It's just like putting yourself in the epicenter, I guess. And that's what he did. So yeah, I think if you're looking to start something, yeah, I guess put yourself in the heart of it. It's probably a decent way to look at it.
I completely agree with that. So still on marketing, what do you think the hardest nowadays? So like as of right now, what do you think the hardest product to market is, as a general?
Gosh,
it's quite a big question, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, you could come up with some ridiculous answers. Like, I'm sure it's probably really hard to sell a really expensive car, I imagine, because there's not that many buyers in the world, and there's quite a few luxury car brands. I have no idea. That's a really tricky question. I mean, I can tell you, I have no idea, actually. The hardest product to sell, I think you'd be doing a disservice to whoever really is the hardest product by saying something silly. But I definitely think for anyone that's starting their own clothing brand, because clothing brand is the most common startup within Britain.
Yeah.
And so, like, I'm sure we all have that one kid at school who's starting their own clothing brand. I'm sure there's probably someone at school.
Completely true, yeah.
Yeah, so I can imagine that is like a really, how do you make your clothing brand stand out? Like before we were talking about Levi's and the North Face owning one product. My co-founder Alex, when he started his brand, I believe he started at high school, he really just did baseball caps with quotes on them. He owned that. He had a phrase, "I came to break hearts" and "almost famous," and that's all that he really pushed to begin with, was like, I'm the cap guy. And that was really successful for him. So I guess I definitely think if creating a clothing brand is probably quite tricky because there's so many of them.
So is it breaking into a market that's already very well established with loads of other big name brands in it is the hardest? Or does it depend?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, though, you could look at the clothing industry and go like, oh, there's loads of brands, but in the way that we really positioned ourselves. So I don't feel like if you want to run a competition, I feel like you have to do it with Prospect 100. Like, obviously, I'm a bit biased, but I'd be like, you have to do it with Prospect 100 because, okay, if you're going to do a tech competition, you'd go with Kaggle. Kaggle are like the biggest, or Agorize are pretty good for data science competitions.
Yeah.
But if you want to run a design competition that gets tens of millions of views and gets articles and like all the, if that's what you're looking for, you have to come to me. Yeah. Because I don't believe anyone else does it to the level that we do. So, or even does it at all to a degree. So, I don't know. Like, there's this really interesting talk. I think it's by Peter Thiel, which says like, competition is for losers, and it's this idea that make yourself so different that you almost don't have a competitor. Like with Alex, he had caps with slogans on. So if you wanted a cap that has like a slogan on, at the time there wasn't really any other brand doing that in the same way that for us, if you want to run a design competition, there's not really anyone else doing it in the way that we're doing it. So yeah, I think that's one way that I look at it personally, which is maybe why I'm not able to give a very articulate answer to your real question.
Yeah, no, I understand what you mean. It's sort of what you were saying before, as well as you want to be the go-to brand when someone thinks of something. So it's very much a similar sort of idea. So one other thing with advertising before we move on is companies having integrity when they advertise. Do you feel like it's important to for companies to have integrity? And do you feel like all companies do have integrity when they advertise, or do you feel like they make things up or change like features of a product slightly to make something seem more appealing?
There's a huge debate going on right now, right? Which is vegan leather really leather, or is it plastic? So obviously I think the job for marketer is to make everything sound great. So is it important? I believe so, yes, because if you're not, you're going to be found out. Like, again, nothing in this day and age can stay hidden for long. Like a celebrity, KSI tried to hide who he was dating, and eventually someone on the internet spends hours finding it. There was that Netflix documentary about the guy that killed a cat, and there was literally just like a photo of a room with a socket and a Hoover, and they managed to track down the exact guy just from this one photo that you couldn't see him. And so there are people out there that are going to find any information that is possible. So I think you should act with integrity. Do all companies, like, obviously not, because I mean, they're trying to make their product sound as great as possible. So I think we would be perhaps a bit blind if we thought that all companies do, which makes it tricky for us. And obviously greenwashing's the kind of the buzz phrase at the moment of how do you tell when a brand is greenwashing or not. I think it's really tricky for a consumer in this day and age. But I would definitely say, from a brand perspective, like again from a Prospect 100 perspective, which is the best perspective I can speak from. I'm always ridiculously conscious that everything Prospect 100 does has to be in favor of designers. Like everything we have to do, because our entire organization is to support designers. So there's a platform called Robinhood, and it democratized the ability to the stock market. And then when everyone was shorting GameStop stocks, and it was affecting kind of, I guess, the big banks, they suspended trading on that stock, which is no longer in favor of the day-to-day trader. It was in favor of the big corporations. And so their brand was really tarnished because that's not being true to your community. And for us, like, we would always, above everything, the first thing we ask ourselves whenever we're working on a project is, what is this supporting young designers? And if it's not currently, what do we need to change? So I just won't go into too many specifics, but for example, if there was a brand coming to us to do a competition, they wanted a designer to design them something, but they didn't want to pay a cash prize for it. Obviously we're not going to go ahead with it, because that's not okay. And in fact, it's not even just there needs to be a cash prize, it needs to be of a certain standard that we sort of negotiate pretty hard with, because for us, I'm not willing to tarnish my reputation with that community for any money. So I definitely think it's important for brands, because at the end of the day, like, people will leave you and unfollow you pretty quickly.
So just that thing you're mentioning there with the cash prize, is that more on you not wanting to be, not like wanting to associate yourself with that competition with the small cash prize, or is it more of, because of how like society is nowadays and people are like, oh, money, so they'll go and do something? Is that more on the people that could potentially enter the competition that won't enter the competition, or is that more on you?
It's not really like a hook for us. It's more, if someone is designing something for a brand, my belief is, like, when we did, there's quite a big one coming up, but for me, it's like, if you're designing that, for a brand, I believe the winner deserves to be heavily compensated. And obviously the point of the competition is a lot of people won't win. And so in my eyes, the prize needs to be so good that it's like, okay, that's worth entering for a design.
Hard as they can on whatever it is.
Well, not even to motivate, but it's like, I just want it to justify to everyone, like, this really is worth entering because the price is so great. And so, I'm really conscious that we have to really operate in a designer first mindset. Because if we don't, we're not serving the people we pledge to serve. And we as an organization don't stand for anything then, which is pointless. So, that's, I think you have to really stand by your core community in that respect.
No, I understand that. So back to your TED Talk, a phrase you mentioned was long-term ambition.
Okay.
So you, as yourself, I don't know why I said that, but what is your long-term ambition? And where do you sort of want to be? Or maybe if you've reached it already, I don't know. What is your aim?
I don't really know. I don't really know what metric I want to put on like a long-term ambition. I think what's quite nice is to work towards really short-term goals as well. So, and obviously I said this a few years ago, so I don't actually remember using that exact phrase. So I probably used it. I don't know in what context, but I really like the fact that I work towards a lot of short-term goals. And so I know that, okay, I know what my next short-term goal is, and what do I need to do today to get towards that short-term goal. I'm thinking in quite a short-term mindset to a degree, which I think is nice, because then you're kind of hopefully moving forward without, I guess,
Yeah.
putting so much pressure, but definitely like always thinking. And I think it's maybe easier for me to also talk about long-term goals with my friends often about, what they're up to. Cause I don't know. I think that's quite nice. But like for myself, I find I'm still at the age now where, we're both super young. I don't know really what KPIs, if you use that phrase, like what KPIs I'm going to put for my long-term ambitions. Like, is it money driven? Personally, for me, probably not so much.
Yeah.
Definitely, like, I guess in the back of the mind somewhere.
Well, yeah, like everyone needs money and everyone does want money.
So, I mean, but I don't know. Like, I really don't know. I definitely think if you'd asked me 2 years ago, would Prospect 100 be where it is today? Or in fact, 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago, we hadn't even started Prospect 100. I hadn't even thought about it really. So, I definitely don't know. But I definitely, no, I want to be in Bedford. So that's the only long-term ambition is to stay in Bedford. But what about yourself? Like, because you're, 16 17 now. Yeah. You're working towards university. So do you find it hard to look past university?
I mean, I just feel like making a decision on something as important as, well, your university, because there's some very like closed courses. So you're going to do a particular course and it leads to a particular career and then you're stuck with that. So I think picking a open course almost, or just something that adds a lot of variety. So if you do a creative course, something that will give you an opportunity to do, so say you do something with cameras, something you could do videography, photography, something like that. Because setting out individual, so as when you're young, you change over time. So when I was like, I don't know, 5, I wanted to be a police officer, and now I'm like, no. So the fact that I might change what I want to do drastically halfway through doing this one set course I've decided to do, I feel like that just the idea of that makes it hard for me to pick a course, if you know what I mean. Because then I'm then stuck with something that I don't potentially want to follow through and do.
Well, we'll have to have a long conversation about that off camera, because I think education's super fascinating to me.
Yeah.
I did 1 year at uni before dropping out, and I guess, like, to what degree is university about what you learn versus, I guess, the experiences and the things you learn, not like the factual, like, no one goes to university to study history just to know what date World War II started or something, so, but we'll have a long chat. But I'm quite actually curious to know on that question, like, because I was just thinking now for a second, what does long-term mean to you?
From like a young person's perspective?
Yeah, like from your perspective.
I think sort of career.
Okay.
So where I'll end up and say, I don't know, when I'm my parents' age, what career I'll be doing, or where I'll be. Not so much where I'm living or something like that, but just what I'll be doing in my life.
For sure. No, okay, to answer that question then really quickly, because I think sometimes I think a bit too on the spot and don't really address things properly. I definitely think when it comes to like a long-term ambition, as I mentioned, I like to think in lots of short-term goals, but clearly there's like a North Star you're aiming towards, right?
So all the short-term goals add up to one final thing.
Exactly. And I think for me, I've always been, the mission for Prospect from 100 from day dot has been the TED of competitions. How do we become the TED of competitions?
Yeah.
And so that's, I guess, quite a long-term goal. But I would definitely say that from a personal level, I've always been deeply, deeply fascinated by how our generation gets into careers, which is actually where Prospect 100 kind of initially stemmed from. And it was all to do with a conversation I had with a guy called Harry Hambley, who goes by the name Ketnips on the internet. I remember speaking to him, and he was 17 or 18 at the time, building this art account that at the time had like 200,000 followers. And I was saying to him, how did you get into the world of art? Like, how did that happen? And what he was telling me was so different from the traditional path into careers. And obviously you then couple that with all of those assemblies you get given when you're a kid of like X percentage of jobs won't exist by this year. And the fact that 85% of jobs, whatever it might be, that you're applying for when you're of age don't exist today. Yeah. And so I just find the idea of how our generation, or how people younger than us or older than us, or any age, I guess, are getting into careers. I'm really deeply fascinated with that as a whole. And I definitely think that obviously changed. Like, obviously since lockdown, that fascination has then twinkled a bit more towards the idea of working from home and how we make that as effective as possible, if it is the most effective way of working. And so I definitely say, like, that's not like a long-term goal, but it's definitely something that I guess will always run alongside my thoughts. But for me, the long-term goal at the moment is, how do we make Prospect 100 the TED of competitions? How do we make Prospect 100 so that when you think competition, you think Prospect 100, and Prospect 100 becomes a pop culture reference? Like, that's my goal.
So talking about the careers that, so say, are advertised to young people. So careers that young people might want to do. So say you're like 10 years old and you've grown up watching a particular YouTuber, say, play video games or something.
Yeah.
They'll be like, oh, that's a really exciting career. I'd love to do that. So people that are actually getting into these new, very, very new careers, because obviously YouTube's only been around for like 15 years or something.
I remember watching one of my first ever proper YouTube videos when I just started. Like, I think I was year 7 or something.
Well, so not very. So it's a very new platform. Is basically the idea. So these careers that are being created off the back of these new platforms, and say you started in lockdown, you got a few million subscribers, and now you sort of faded off into nothing. You still have a few people watching you, but it's not as many, and you've dropped out of university to try and pursue this career.
This is becoming quite hypothetical quite quickly. I like it. Keep going.
It's quite hypothetical. But do you feel like so people that will suddenly switch everything they're doing to devote all their resources into this one potentially not very sustainable career? I don't know. What do you think about that? Do you think it's worth it or it's not worth it?
I actually have a really good personal example of this. Won't mention by name, but there were some really good friends of mine who started when I was 15. They had a YouTube channel. They were 16.
Yeah.
And they were doing really, really well. They were sort of, you had KSI, you had the Sidemen, and then you had these guys. Like, they were big. Yeah. I remember hanging out with them in London once, and like a lot of the Sidemen boys would come over and talk to them. Like Calix fully knew who they were and stuff. Yeah. And they dropped out of school. There was 4 of them, sorry. 3 of them had GCSEs. 1 of them dropped out before GCSEs.
Yeah.
And they were making insane money at the time. Like, by anyone's standards, insane money. They then created a video when they were 17 or 18 years old. So still super young. Super young, yeah. They created a video that had their channel deleted from the platform. And what I found really interesting from that experience, I was only 16, maybe at the time, 17, was, first of all, as you said, how quickly everything can change, but importantly, like, what duty does YouTube have to these creators? Because that was their only source of income. Yeah. It was, that was their livelihoods. That channel was everything to them. And now we're looking at a world where, I'm constantly petrified that Prospect 100's account might be taken down for copyright, for who knows what reason. That's what I'm petrified about, because for me, my Instagram account probably carries a bit too much value than it should. And for these guys, their entire audience was on one platform, really. All of their revenue was from this one platform, and they lost it overnight. Yeah. You can't go back to school. Yeah. You can't all of a sudden just jump back into education or whatever. So they had to make a pivot. And that was, I haven't spoken to them in too much detail about the pivot, because I think it was probably quite sensitive at the time. They were still very young, and they've all pivoted in different directions. But that's I think that's one thing which we don't speak about enough, is like there are plenty of kids who are starting these channels, then being exposed to fame. Like, they really, every time we went out into the streets of London, they would get recognised a lot. Yeah. They were exposed to huge amounts of money, and then everything was taken away from them overnight. Yeah. And I find that, so I can't quite remember the original question. We'll get back to that in a second. But I find that to be quite scary. And I think platforms do owe their creators, and not just creators, but giggers, full stop, more security or more support, a better support network. Because these guys, if you're 16 and that's just happened to you, you would feel like your world has just fallen apart in front of you, and there's no one there to support you. Like, if I said to my parents, oh yeah, I have a YouTube channel and I do this many views and this amount of money, they would have no idea what's going on. Yeah. So my parents aren't adequately, at least in my case, they're not adequately equipped to support me in that scenario. and YouTube weren't supporting. So a 16, 17-year-old has to work that all out for themselves.
Yeah.
And I think there's more that needs to be done from the support angle. Sorry, again, I forgot the exact question.
It sort of is a career in online, well, the example we're doing is content creation.
Yeah.
Is that a sustainable career?
I mean, I think I would say so. I think content's so important to companies now. It's, Ryanair, I know it more and more and more for their founder giving talks, or not founder, the CEO giving talks, and the TikTok account. If it wasn't for those two things, I wouldn't really know anything about Ryanair other than it's cheap flights. So I think content's really important. So whether it's being a freelancer, creating content for yourself, as a YouTuber might, or creating content, I think content creation as a bracket's here to stay. But it's quite similar in the way that there are plenty of jobs where you freelance. Like farmers can freelance. So you either work for a farm or you go around as a contract farmer yourself for different farms, or designers do the same. Perhaps that's going to be a similar case here where, okay, I'm a content creator on my own channel, but the revenue's not quite enough for that than what I need. So I need to go and work full time for an ad agency like Wyden and Kennedy or whoever. But I think content's so important. So 100% it's sustainable. It's another freelance job. It's like being a farmer. Not a great parallel, but hopefully my point's kind of made where there are a lot of jobs where they're freelance and it's just a different way of working.
But then just the thing with like content creation online is it can all just be turned off overnight. With the example you gave, to say Ryanair, I'm sure a lot of their like marketing resources has now gone into their TikTok or their Instagram. So if they make one wrong move or one wrong something happens, that's just all gone.
Their personal brand is, but that doesn't mean that they aren't great at creating content. Like I'm sure that all of those guys would have had particularly in this day and age, would have a really good shot at getting a job at a top ad agency because they still built an audience of millions of people. And so, yes, that element is, that kind of freelance effort's gone. And that is quite different, as in, I guess, if you're a freelance designer, all of a sudden you're not going to become a nobody overnight just because. So it's different. I acknowledge that, but I definitely believe that content now is more important than it's ever been, and there are more opportunities to turn that into a full-time career than there were when they were in a bad position. So is it becoming more of a sustainable career? Perhaps is the question. I think it's becoming more and more sustainable because more and more brands are realizing the power of content and creating their own content in-house. So I think it's becoming more and more sustainable. But again, it's like any freelance job, it's tricky.
I completely agree again. So back to you and your career. It sounds like a really boring question. Like I've just got it off Google or something. But what is the best lesson someone has ever taught you, or you've been taught, or you found out, or something like that?
I think that idea of owning one thing has been pretty powerful. Like the idea of owning with the best design competitions. That's been super powerful. I really like the analogy of perception is reality. Because again, like we were some kids, still are, some kids running competitions on Instagram. And there are plenty of people that do that, but the minute like one or two celebrities put their name to us, all of a sudden it was a big deal, and all of a sudden we were elevated. So I do quite like that quote. But I definitely think the one that really stuck with me was a kid called Jalen Bledsoe from the US. Really kind of created this almost like diagram. In fact, it's kind of similar to like, I think David Hume's philosophical theory that you learn in like year 9 RE. And it was you create like a grid 2x2, and it's this idea of if you don't start your own organization, what's the best that could possibly happen, and what's the worst that could possibly happen? And so if you do start something, what's the best that can happen and what's the worst that can happen? And he told me that at 14, so I was always wanting to create and do things. It's like, particularly when you're younger, you have less to lose than when you're older. So if you've got kids, if you have rent to pay, bills to pay, clearly that's trickier than being 14, where you probably don't have kids to feed and you don't have those same responsibilities. And what's great is within this day and age, you can use social media to do anything. So like my first proper business, I guess, in that respect was a social media marketing agency, because that was free to do. I can manage someone's social media for free. I don't need anything for that. So it didn't cost me a penny. All it required me to do was to go and knock on some businesses' doors and say, hey, it's a school project. Can I speak to you for a bit? And then try and sell them this social media service. And then everything from there was free. So I think what was great is it was no risk to me if it fails. So I've lost like a few hours of my life trying to sell to people. So I think that was a really eye-opening experience, let's say.
Yeah, so just to conclude what you just said, so it's pretty much when you're young, you've got a lot of opportunities and a lot of time, and nowadays pretty much anyone can do anything within reason on the internet. You can learn all these new skills or do all these new things or start a company literally out of your bedroom. So just to take advantage of what you can.
Yeah, that's my belief. I'm always conscious of saying it so explicitly just because you know there's obviously lots of different caveats in there. But on the whole, like that was my belief, and that's something that really stuck with me, and it's probably the one message I tried to, if ever speaking to someone, I don't know if I should start. So I was like, well, why not? Like, you're 16.
Yeah, like what is there to lose? Sort of
exactly.
Thing. Yeah.
That's my belief.
Yeah. So if you could go back to, so how old are you now?
Just turned 23.
Just turned 23.
2 weeks ago, yeah.
Oh, okay. Happy birthday. 2 weeks
Cheers,
ago.
man.
If you could go back to 18, so when you're just about to start uni, I know you said you dropped out, but still just that time in your life, and you're looking at your opportunities at that age. Is there anything you'd change about how you went about?
No, I think I had a pretty decent mindset, I hope. But I definitely think one thing I love saying to friends who are at uni is like, imagine this. You are in a place where there are probably tens of thousands of people. Often they have quite a lot of spare time because I don't know what universities you're looking at, but my one, we were barely ever in lectures.
Yeah.
So you have loads of time, tens of thousands of people that have spare time, and across those tens of thousands of people, there's lots of different skill sets.
Yeah.
And I think what's really interesting is the fact that if anyone was interested in starting their own thing, like, for example, you're clearly interested in podcasting. So when you go to university, there'll be loads of people there who have really different skills. There might be someone that's studying acting who wants to become a presenter, for example. There might be someone who, like, obviously, you're really good at all the technical stuff as well as presenting. And so, you know, you can imagine you find a consultant. There might be someone that studied marketing. It's like, this could be a really cool project for them to work on. Of how many views can I get on a podcast? Because even if it doesn't become their full-time occupation, it's a case study for them to use in their CV of like, I was the head of marketing for this podcast and we got to this position in the podcast charts on Apple, whatever. And so I really think anyone that's going to uni now, I would really be looking at it as the chance of a lifetime to be creating something new, because there are so many people around you with so many different skills. And at what point in your life, like when you're into the working environment, not so many people, a bit busier, real life liabilities, and the facilities aren't there. Like when you're like here, I mean, this setup's absolutely insane. There's not many places in the world other than educational establishments where you're going to get high-tech kit, support from staff who are quite often like really good at their craft. So I would say to anyone that's like going to university or has just started or whatever it might be, like use it as an opportunity to build something, because I'm really strongly believe that even though I don't still do social media marketing for companies, I learned so much by doing that about marketing, branding, sales, even silly dumb things like invoicing. Like, how do you, what kind of terms do companies want to hear? Because like, if I say, oh, I'm just going to send you like a bill for what I do, that's not, you know, that is, they say the word invoice, like simple things like that. I learned by doing, and I was really good at, I think I learned best by doing. And I think that when you're at university, there's a real opportunity to learn by doing. And, you know, we were just speaking, you don't know where you're going to uni yet, right?
No.
If at all, but, you know, I can imagine you going crazy with a podcast, or maybe like even short films or whatever it might be. Like, I can imagine some crazy stuff. Like, again, the setup's insane. So you've done a great job.
Thank you. But yeah, so it's sort of just taking very much advantage of what's around you and who's around you.
For sure.
Just on a day-to-day basis sort of thing.
And the one final thing I'd say about uni is it's very rare that you're going to be around people from such different cultural backgrounds. Like, I remember at uni, people were from pretty much every part of the world. Like there were, I mean, my uni was very much predominantly Americans, but also a lot of South Africans, Zimbabweans, people from sort of, again, I never really had the chance to mingle with so many people from South Africa or America or whatever it might be. And they all come with different perspectives, different skill sets, different like outlooks on life. So yeah, I don't know, I really envy someone that's going into that environment, because it's really, the way I have it in my head is it's quite a nice kind of protective bubble where, you know, there's support systems around you that want to help you, whether that be the students or the staff or the facilities, whatever it might be, which you don't have in like normal life.
No, I agree with that. Well, I mean, I don't yet know, but I see where you're coming from.
I'm sure you're looking forward to it, though.
I very much am looking forward to it. So since you joined university or you started your own business, is there anything you regret, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, I think we did plenty of dumb things. One of the first things we did was we hired a PR agency to try and push our competitions, and it flopped horrifically, and that was like our only expense for the whole year. So like things like that, but I don't really regret it, because I guess again you learn from the mistakes. So like there's not been anything we've done that's horrifically bad where it's sort of that was like the verge of, you know, killing anything. I don't think there's any regrets. There's definitely dumb stuff we've done though. But I think as well, there were plenty of smart things we did, which kind of balanced it out. So I remember thinking sometimes like, okay, we did that really dumb thing, but we have done a few smart things, which most people would have maybe forked out quite a lot of cash for. So we were lucky to balance out. But you obviously try not to do the dumb things again and again. What about yourself though? I'm keen. Like, is there anything you've done it? I feel like at this age, there's little you can.
Not really. I don't think. I mean, there's the odd like, oh, I shouldn't have done that sort of thing. But in terms of major like life change, not really. No, I don't feel like. And I feel like until a lot of responsibility has been laying on me for something, whether that's like owning a company or running part of a company or something like that, I don't feel like the wrong things I do would necessarily have the same effect as me just doing something wrong.
And in that respect, because obviously you just said that there's nothing you've really regretted, what would you say, I guess, to your peers who probably turned down things because they're like worried about regret? Like, there must be plenty of people in your year like, oh, I don't want to do that because I'm just not sure, like, what if something bad happens, blah blah blah. Like, I don't want to do the school play because what if I forget my lines on stage or something? Like, what would you say to those people?
It's sort of what we've been discussing the whole time. Just why not? Like, take whatever opportunities you have and say someone doesn't want to come on the podcast, which has happened before. They're like, oh no, I'm scared to come on. Like, it's just me and you sitting in a room. Like, it's not a pressured environment really. It's just like a conversation. It's just normal. Just take the opportunity. If you really don't want to do it, that's fine. But as of just me suggesting the idea to you and you being like, no, just why not? Just take an opportunity. We could come on, we could have a good chat, or you could come on and we'd have a rubbish chat and I wouldn't end up posting it. But either way, I think it is sort of the Gen Z mindset again as well, that they will just decline ideas straight out the bat after not really hearing or them being explained to them.
I think what's interesting, particularly about your, like, when you're at school or universities, you have this there are like, I don't know, 1,000 kids at school with you.
Yeah.
And they're going to maybe tease or mock or whatever.
Yeah.
Particularly if something goes wrong, because like, I guess you're open for it. Have you found though, with anything you've ever done at school, anyone's ever been anything but genuinely supportive?
I mean, where do you draw the line between sort of them just taking the piss out of you just for a joke and then them like actually not going with it? Because I know there are people that will pretend, oh, you do podcasting, that's a bit weird, or you take photos, that's a bit weird. But whether they actually mean it or whether they're just doing it to like look cool to their friends or whatever, I don't really know.
But for example, there's one person in, like, I think maybe your year, maybe the year above you, who I've seen online does quite a lot of commentating at sports events and stuff.
I know you're talking about,
yeah, and I can imagine, like, that's quite a scary thing. You're putting yourself out there and you can imagine, like, oh, loads of people are going to take the mick out of me or whatever. But I don't know, like whenever I see it online, I feel like everyone shows crazy love and is really supportive. And I can imagine that if you didn't do it because you're worried about something that's not even happened yet, you're worried that someone's going to say something that they've not even said yet, if that makes sense. Like, I felt like that was always a weird reason not to do things, to be super scared of other people's perceptions that they haven't even laid out yet. Because most of the time, actually, people are way more supportive. Like, I'd like to think that you've had quite a lot of compliments for your work, actually more than
is true.
teasing.
And the boy you're talking about as well, he's very, like, he's quite a good friend of mine. He takes every opportunity that comes up to do creative stuff or just all the commentating work. He like really puts himself into it and will be there whenever they need him. And he literally does exactly what you're saying, just takes every opportunity he can. And then it's becoming successful for him as well.
And I bet a lot of people show him a lot of love at school.
They do, exactly, yeah. Like, the respect you garnish from doing things that, as you start out, people may say, oh, that's a bit weird. But then as you become popular with it and become almost famous with it, they'll be like, oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when I was at school, there was a guy that was like a cyclist, and obviously a load of people be like, oh, cycling, whatever.
Yeah.
And then recently he was just in the Olympics, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay. Like, that's really cool.
Well
and
done.
so,
exactly, yeah.
You know, so again, I think to not do something because of peer pressure it's not even real, doesn't exist at this point. Like, it's all in your head. I feel like it's a weird reason. So
I think almost with that idea as well, if people are peer pressuring you into not doing something, I think for some people, and possibly for me as well, it almost fuels you to do it even more, to sort of show them that you can become something bigger than what they think you can become.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Like, I bet the commentator guy, which we won't say the name of, but I can imagine, you know, like when he commentates that first massive game, it'll be like a massive deal for not just him, but for everyone that's been around him all the way. So, yeah, I really feel like school and university as a whole is a great environment for building.
Well, I think we're done, unless you've got anything else to add on.
No, I just want to thank you. And again, like, the setup's insane here. So I don't know who you've got coming on next, but they're going to have a great time. So.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming on, though, of course, and taking time out of your clearly very busy life to
I appreciate it, man. Well, thanks so much. And for everyone that's watching, make sure you click, like, subscribe. Like, I was always told, that's one thing when you're on social media, is you just tell people what to do.
Yeah.
Apparently, like, if you kind of hope they do it now, you got to say, click that like button, subscribe, comment below, and be ready for episode 3 coming very soon. Cheers, man.
Thank you very much for coming on. Thank you.
No, thanks so much.